Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. Today, I'm delighted we're going to be speaking to Fiona Quinn. In 2017, Fiona walked and cycled the length of Great Britain solo. In 2018, she's got a very new and exciting world record that she is going after. Fiona, you are an adventurer, a speaker and an entrepreneur, which is absolutely fantastic. But can you just tell everybody maybe just a little bit more about your backstory?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've definitely not always been adventurous. When I was younger, I very much wasn't an outdoorsy kind of girl. I actually went camping when I think it was about 15 or 16 on the Isle of Wight for about 2 weeks. And when you're stuck in one tent in one place for that amount of time, unfortunately, it tends to fill with bugs, and that very much put me off camping for a long time. But then it was back in, I think it's 2014, I heard Al Humphreys speak about micro-adventures, and I thought, oh, just one night in under the stars in a sleeping bag, maybe I could do that. So I went with some friends and we slept on a hill for one night, and that's really where I got into adventure. And it's kind of all spun from there, really. I guess in terms of the entrepreneurship side of things, I have always wanted to own my own business. I've always been really independent and really very much wanting to direct my own career in my life. That journey really started when I left university. So I studied real estate at university, very different to what I'm doing now. But I left and I did the typical thing. I went and got a corporate job. I worked in the city in London for a really big corporate firm, and I absolutely hated it, to be honest. Like, it just so wasn't me. I was doing a 4-hour round commute every day from my parents' house because I was on minimum wage and I couldn't afford to live in London. So that just really was not fun. And it only took 6 weeks for me to decide that wasn't for me. So I quit just 6 weeks after I started my first graduate job. And it was from there that I started setting up my first business, organic skincare business. It's all British brands. And the reason that I did that, as I say, I wanted to really be the director of my own life. And this passion for business had really started very young. So this was a great opportunity. I had no commitments whatsoever to just have a go at starting my first business. And I ran it for 4 years while I also had a full-time job working in research in the field that I had studied at university, which was great because it was such a flexible job. It allowed me to do the business on the side. And the first business, while technically it was a failure, it was awesome. Like, I learned so much about business, about myself, about how I want to work, where I want to work, the kinds of things that I'm good at, what I'm rubbish at. It was a brilliant learning curve. And from there, I've then gone on to start up some other businesses. Some have failed again, but again, learned huge amounts, and others have been more successful. So they include, I ran a veg box scheme at one point, and I now run an adventure book club, which I absolutely love and is doing really well. So lots and lots of different entrepreneurial experiences, which have led me to be where I am today.
I'd be interested going back actually when you were running a business, still working a full-time job. Were you getting much time to do adventures or to do exercise? Were you managing to fit that in?
Really back at that point was before I kind of discovered adventure. It was really only after I closed that first business and was made redundant that I heard Al Humphreys speak about micro adventures, and that I got into the adventure side of things. I guess at that earlier point in my life with the first business, at that point, I was getting into cycling. So my boyfriend at the time was very into cycling. So I got my first bike as an adult at that point, and I started cycling into London or into the Surrey Hills at the weekends. And then we did sort of London to Brighton and London to Cambridge, these kind of big sportives. So I started to get into that side of things. I wouldn't say it was maybe like a kind of a training or a regular thing. It was more just a sort of fun little thing that I did on the side every now and again. That's kind of how it started, really.
Yeah. What is it about adventure that you love so much?
I think it's the freedom, because so when I started with that cycling, I think it was really a combination of the cycling and then hearing Al speak about micro adventures that kind of came together to lead me into developing my own adventures. And for me, what I love about adventure is very much the fact that I can decide how fast I go, where I go, what time I stop, and all of those decisions are mine to be made. Whereas if you're doing sort of a set challenge, which are awesome, but you just don't have that kind of same autonomy, which I just love in life. And also, I think doing an adventure on your own versus with lots of other people is that it gives you that the kind of self-development side of adventure. So like when you really are struggling at something and you're absolutely hating what you're doing, but you're in the middle of this adventure and the only choice you have is to keep going forwards. You learn so much from that, from doing that on your own and surviving and thriving, than I think than you would necessarily with other people.
I mean, one of the rides that you did was it's a very classic ride from cycling from London to Brighton. Tell us a little bit more about that and how it came about.
Yeah, so while I was doing that ride, I was working pretty much full time, and I really wanted to get out my bike again. I hadn't been out on it for a while, so I decided that I would just leave my job in London after work and just keep cycling until I hit the coast, which is a really lovely thing to do. I think it took me about 5 hours door to door. So if you do it sort of height of summer, you've got plenty of daylight in the evening to do it. And it's a lovely way of realizing that actually, we're an island. You're never really that far away from the coast. Most people could probably do that. It's just a really nice way of getting outside, even just during the week.
I mean, I think what's really interesting about you is the progression. Like, even if we just take the cycling, for example, the first time you got on your bike, then cycling London to Brighton. And then in 2016, you did Cycle Great Britain.
Yeah.
I suppose I'm really interested in understanding and getting you to share more about the steps of the journey and how you ended up doing that.
Yeah. So it was very gradual. It wasn't like I suddenly woke up one day and wanted to cycle the length of the country. As you say, it was definitely a journey, and it sort of started with just going out every now and again with my boyfriend at the time, and he was giving me that confidence to be on a bike. Like, I hadn't been on a bike since I was probably 12, so to even know like how the brakes work or how to change the inner tube if you get a puncture, all these kind of little things are where I started, and then that gave me confidence to go and do something bigger. So from doing London to Brighton as the sportive, I then decided to make up my own first real adventure, which was to cycle home for Christmas. So from London to my parents, I think it was about 80 miles. It was great. I mean, I totally didn't make it. I ended up having to stop in a pub. I was probably about 80% of the way, I think, because of the horrendous hail of the storm that had come on Christmas Eve. But it was, again, great fun. The first time I'd ever navigated on my own with a bike. Loads of learning from that. And then it was kind of the next thing was the triathlon that I made up. So I knew that I loved cycling and I loved that autonomy of doing your own adventure, but I wanted to add some other kind of disciplines into it. I'm definitely not a runner or a swimmer. So I knew that those kind of two elements of a triathlon would be out for me, but I do like walking, and the idea of stand-up paddleboarding down a local river was a great fun one to think about. So I decided to travel down the length of the River Cam, which is pretty close to where I grew up. It's about 70 miles in all. So I walked the full length, I cycled the full length, and then I stand-up paddleboarded a bit in the middle. And that sort of adventure helped me see that I could do more. I could take it to another level. I could do something a little bit bigger. And it was at the end of that, which was, I think, summer 2016, that I was like, right, I want to do something really big now. And I didn't have a huge amount of time before autumn set in. So what's the kind of classic British adventure that I can do that's super easy to organise? What kind of Land's End to John O'Groats, as you say, is the British adventure that everyone wants to do. And really, it is pretty straightforward. You kind of get on your bike at Land's End and you just head north, and then you keep cycling each day. And it's such a fun and easy way of getting around on your bike. It's a really, really lovely way to see the country. And it's so doable. Like, you think 1,000+ miles is a long, long way. But when you break it down and you just sort of look at it day to day, and you're maybe doing sort of 40, 50 miles a day, sometimes much bigger days, sometimes much smaller days, but you take it at your own pace and you go the direction that you quite fancy and on the kind of roads that you enjoy cycling on, then really it's such an achievable thing to do. And I would definitely recommend, as I say, doing it on your own. You meet so many more people when you're adventuring on your own. And it's just a lovely way to get to know the country that we live in.
Yeah. I mean, what was the most challenging aspect of that whole ride, of that whole cycle?
The Land's End to John O'Groats?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first one that I did in September 2016, definitely the most challenging thing was when I got to the Cairngorms in Scotland. So I'd done, I think, about 800 miles at that point, and I had roughly 200 left. And while it had been totally challenging at the beginning, so it had been much harder than I expected on the really steep Cornwall, the hills in Cornwall and Devon. But actually, once you get past that bit and you kind of get into a routine, it was fine. But when I got to that point in the Cairngorms, I think it was day 18, something like that. And I was due to do my biggest day yet. So I was trying to do, I think, 80 odd miles in one day in order to get from Pitlochry all the way up to Inverness. And it's quite a sort of remote-ish region. And there was this horrible kind of storm, lots and lots of rain, and I'd gone the wrong way. And I realised that in order to get back to the path that I was supposed to be on, I had to I couldn't even cycle up this hill. It was too steep. I had to get off and push my bike for about half an hour, 45 minutes up this hill in the rain. I was absolutely soaked to the bone, freezing cold, and it was miserable. And so I got to the other side of this massive hill and I was back on the track I was supposed to be on, and it runs next to, I think it's the A9. So there's just tons and tons of traffic whizzing by, but there's no cafes, there's no hotels, there's like literally nothing other than people in cars whizzing past you. And when you're so cold that it hurts just to hold onto the handlebars, it's agonizing and so lonely, and you just feel awful. And I sort of saw this corner coming up ahead, and I was like, surely round the next valley, like there must be like a cafe or some sign of life other than people in cars that can help me. And so I kept pushing through. I kept cycling in the rain, and I got around the corner and just the wilderness stretched out before me, and there was nothing. There was nobody there that could help me. And in that moment, you just fill up, and I was just crying my eyes out into the wind. And that was definitely the hardest part of the whole thing. To be in that situation, you just feel so stupid. Like, how did I get to this point that I'm this cold? Like, I can't stop shaking, and there's no one here that can help me. And yeah, that's a pretty challenging place to be in. But at the end of the day, I made it out of there. I kept going, and I eventually found a B&B, and they managed to give me a lift to a station. Like, I think I was probably almost verging on hypothermia, so it would have been stupid to carry on. But looking back, I'm so glad that I did that adventure, because I know now that I would push on and I can keep going, and I can achieve a lot more than I think I can. And actually I went back last September in 2017, and I did the ride again, slightly different route, but I did actually do that section of the route again through the Cairngorms, and this time made it all the way through. So it's, a huge learning curve, but a really tough point in that particular adventure. But it just really, reaffirms in you that you are very, very capable.
Do you know, what I think is really interesting is when you're talking there is about the toughness dealing with the storm and the rain, and this, being out there in the wilderness and just being miserable and feeling stupid. But actually, what I'm getting from when you talk is actually you look at everything as this learning experience. So, some people could say, oh, well, that's a failure, you didn't complete it. But I don't really look at it that way, and I'm sort of getting the sense that you don't either, and that it's just this opportunity to learn from it. So what were the key learnings? I mean, did you want to go back the following year? Was it unfinished business, or did it take you a while to almost psych yourself up again to think, can I face it?
I mean, the key learnings were definitely very much that I am so much more capable than I give myself credit for. It's really easy to view things as failings, when actually it would be more of a failure to have not started in the first place. And having traveled so far, like 800 miles by bike, is just it's an incredible personal feeling. Even if I didn't share my story with anyone, knowing that I've done that is incredibly rewarding personally. In terms of going back, it was definitely unfinished business. I felt like I could do this. If I just had another chance, then I could definitely do it. And when I went back, I did. I managed to complete it. And I actually went a slightly longer route. I went via London when I went back again. And I had a much longest day that I've ever done on the bike when I did it the second time. I think I did 118 miles in one day or something. So it was great to do it again, but also to keep pushing as well in terms of what I'm capable of.
Absolutely. Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, what was that like, sort of, getting to the end of that challenge and finishing it?
Yeah, it was great. It was kind of a double-edged sword in terms of that adventure, doing the route again. Certainly at the beginning, it was quite tough mentally. Like, I totally could physically do it at this point. I'd been cycling for a while. I had like my cycling legs, so that was fine. But like mentally going back and doing the same thing again, it's like, oh, I'm doing this again. You're sort of on the road and you like, it's really just really familiar. Whereas I think the thing that I love about adventure when it's new and it's exciting and it's challenging. So certainly the beginning stages of doing it a second time was a bit tough, but getting to the end was amazing. And actually, one thing that's come through in my ventures in 2017, so both in the cycle but also in another one that I did in the walk, was social media and the way that interacts with an adventure and but also plays out in real life. So I've met loads of people through Instagram in particular, who I've then met in real life through the adventures. And that was wonderful. On that second bike ride, I met a guy called Rory, who was also cycling Land's End John O'Groats at the same time. And our paths just happened to cross over for this day. And then I met up with him at the end again. And it was lovely to have that kind of someone to share it with and the camaraderie, as well as those bits on my own as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's pros and cons to, doing adventures solo and doing them together with other people. I mean, one thing I'd be interested in going back and discussing is, you said it was tough mentally, sort of going past the same areas which maybe you've done before. And a lot of the challenges that you've done, there is obviously the physical element, but it does come down to the mental side of things. What have you learned about mental resilience, mental toughness, or your mindset while you've been out doing these walking challenges or cycling challenges?
Yeah, it's very much like, kind of, you're always told when you're growing up, like, have a positive mental attitude, like how you feel about stuff affects the outcome. But that's so true, and it's so heightened on an adventure. If you feel like, oh, I hate this is rubbish, why am I here? It's raining, it's cold, I don't want to be here. Then you're going to make yourself feel rubbish while you're doing it. And you're probably not going to get to the end as quickly as you could have done, or you're just not going to perform as well as you could have done. Whereas if you're really positive, even if it's a rubbish situation, if you just try and find little positives, then it just really helps you to move forward. And also it kind of, the energy that you put out is what you get back. And particularly if you're meeting people or chatting to anyone, if you can just be really open and really accepting of where you are and what's happening, then I think it's much easier to connect with people when you're on your walk. And that is such a huge part of adventure, is meeting people along the way and connecting with people. So so I think it's a great way of developing your kind of mental toughness, and being able to not only withstand bad stuff, but just having a positive outlook and being open to what could happen.
I mean, 2017 was a big year for you, not only going back to cycle Great Britain, but also to walk Great Britain. So that, I think that's quite different, because obviously on a bike you can cover, well, you covered like 115 or 118 miles in a day, whereas walking, it's a little bit slower. So
it is.
So just talk to us a little bit about why you decided to go on this adventure.
So the walking adventure was to walk from John O'Groats down to Land's End, so heading south this time. And I decided to do it because, having done the first bike ride, I knew that I loved exploring in the UK. There were so many places that I'd never seen that I got to see on that first bike ride. But at the same time, if you look at a map, there's so many places I still hadn't seen. And I really wanted to go back and explore those places. But I sort of, a bit like that triathlon that I made up along the River Cam, I wanted to challenge myself in a new way. So walking is pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. Most of us can do it. We just put one foot in front of the other and eventually you get there. But it's definitely a very different physical and mental challenge. I knew that it would be slow, obviously, but I didn't quite appreciate just how slow walking is, particularly when you're in the wilderness of Scotland. You're in the Highlands, and so I didn't come directly south like most people do from John O'Groats. I decided to head west. So I went all the way across the north coast to Durness and then came down the west coast of Scotland, which is a much trickier route. It's much hillier, it's much windier, it's much wetter, which is why most people don't go that way. But when I've been cycling, I was told that west is best in Scotland, so I wanted to go check it out. And while I was in that area, it was a very remote area, and I had to carry about 3 or 4 days worth of food with me, which again just adds the physical strain. So in terms of cycling, obviously all your kit's on your bike, and okay, it might be a little bit exhausting to cycle and maybe your knees might hurt a little bit, but generally there's not sort of huge amount of pressure put on your body. Whereas when you're walking, as I'm sure you know, carrying everything on your back hurts a lot. It hurts your back, your neck, your hips, your knees, your feet, kind of hurts everything really. So there was definitely different physical pressures from that point of view. And again, the slowness of the walking was very hard to get used to. But once I kind of found my rhythm, I think it took me about 2 weeks to get into that walk. So I didn't do any training for any of these really. I think the most long distance walking I'd done before I left was, well, it was along the Cam. So it would have been about 4 days, about 20 miles a day. And that's it. That's all I'd done. I didn't really want to train because it was such a long walk doing John O'Groats to Land's End. It took me 57 days in the end. But I knew that the first 2 weeks would be training in themselves, and they definitely were. It was hard, but I quite liked that initial physical challenge, and then you feel like you get into it, and then it sort of changes how it feels as you're going along, which is quite nice.
Talk to me a little bit more about the planning. So you've mentioned a little bit about your route, about going west, but also, what kit were you taking? What equipment were you planning to wild camp? How are you going to work it?
Yeah, so my planning was a little bit last minute. My plan was, like, I'd been speaking to Sean Conway, who obviously ran the length of Britain, and he took a ridiculously small amount of kit. And I was like, oh yeah, it'll be fine. I can kind of do something similar. I can like take a little day bag and that'll all be I need. But it totally didn't work out like that. I borrowed a friend's day bag and then I couldn't even fit my sleeping bag in it. So I had to completely rethink about 3 days before I left. So I bought a new backpack. I think I had about a 60-litre backpack, something like that. And I borrowed a friend's sleeping bag, so it was much, much smaller. I borrowed a friend's tent. I just had super light kit. I did have a sort of jet boil with me to make food if I needed to. So I had as light a kit as I could in terms of like clothes. So I had the clothes that I was wearing, and then I had a night set of clothes. So I only had two pairs of everything pretty much, other than underwear. So yeah, as light as I could. And then in terms of route planning, it was very much like I wanted to go to the West Coast. So I headed along that way. And then coming south, it was kind of partly the most direct route, but also I wanted to go along the West Highland Way and along the Caledonian Canal as well. So I made sure that I sort of fitted those bits into my route. And it was very much looking at how far do I think I can go each day, and then just looking at where is there a town that I could get food at the end of the day. And that's really how I planned my adventure. Yeah, so that was kind of the essence of it. In terms of mileage, I thought, 20 miles is a pretty average day for most people. So I figured that would be my average. But about halfway through, I got injured, and that's kind of where things changed, really.
Oh, tell us a little bit more about that. What happened?
Yeah, so I think it was almost exactly halfway in. So it's about 500 miles, and I was in the Lake District, which is absolutely beautiful. I'd never been there before, so it was a wonderful place to get injured. But I had developed tendonitis on my left foot, and it was just absolute agony. I couldn't move my foot at all, and I was kind of stranded by the side of the road, not really knowing what to do. I kind of threw my pack down and sat there thinking, do I get a taxi somewhere? Like, what should I try and hobble on somewhere? I can't really walk. And amazingly, about 5 minutes after I sat down, this family drove up and they said, do you need a lift anywhere? And they were amazing. They took me to the local minor injuries unit, who diagnosed that I had tendonitis and gave me crutches and some painkillers. And then I think it was about 5 days off at a friend's house in the Lake District. And that amazingly, it pretty much got better from there. And then I started walking again, just small days of sort of 10 miles each. And then after those initial sort of 10-mile days, I tried to up it again, and I sort of went to 15 and then 20 odd miles. And at this point, I looked at a map and I thought, well, I'm about a week behind. And I kind of, while I was getting into the walking, I also didn't want it to drag out any longer than it had to. So I knew that having cycled it, that between, I think it was roughly Chorley and Bristol, it's pretty flat. It's a pretty flat area of the country. So if I could up my mileage, then I could possibly make up that week that I'd had off and maybe finish on my original end date, which was an interesting challenge, having just had tendonitis. And it kind of added a whole new challenge, sort of level of challenge to the adventure. But it was, it was really, really tiring. So what I ended up doing was doing 30 miles a day for 6 days straight. And amazingly, I managed to do it. It was about 11 hours of walking each day. It was pretty bad weather, unfortunately, during that time. But I managed to get there, and then I managed to get to the end point. I was just 1 day behind my original schedule. So I sort of almost managed to make up that time, despite the injury issues.
Oh my God, that is epic. And just as someone who's walked those distances, I'm always literally like, oh, I feel your pain.
Yeah.
When you're out there, walking along, do you listen to music? Do you listen to podcasts, audiobooks? Is this just thinking time for you? How do you use that time?
It tends to be that, I don't really listen to music or podcasts or anything. I try to digital detox as much as I can, other than taking pictures and occasionally recording videos. But when I'm actually just walking, I try to just kind of absorb the environment that I'm in, whether that's sort of looking at the beautiful scenery or the wildlife, or talking to local people as I go through. But I learned that the one thing that I absolutely shouldn't do is think about walking. So I remember, I think it was just 2 weeks in, and I hadn't quite found my walking legs yet, and I was absolutely shattered. And it was just one of those days where I was thinking about the walking, and I was like, right, I've got 20 miles to go today until I get to Ullapool, and I'm really hurting. And I was like, sort of, oh, it's an hour in, so that means I've probably got about 17 miles to go. And then sort of like every 20 minutes, I was like, right, that's just 1 mile down, so still 16 miles to go then. And I think that really plays tricks on your mind if you think about the walking too much. So I try to avoid doing that as much as possible. But yeah, mainly just kind of absorbing where I am and what's around me.
What would you say the highlight was from that trip? I mean, I know it's very, very difficult when you've walked 1,000 miles over, over 8 weeks to pick up, 1 point. But is there a point, maybe not the end, not the finish, but something while you're out there that really sort of just sticks in your mind or your memory?
I think there's kind of a theme, but there's lots of little points where it happened. I kind of touched on earlier in terms of people from Instagram. So two people came and found me from Instagram while I was on my walk, and they brought me cake, which was amazing. But also I just kind of would sometimes rock into a cafe and just tell them what I'm doing and have a coffee or whatever. And they'd just bring me over like a free slice of cake, and they just say they would say I think what you're doing is amazing. Like, this is, just to keep you going. And those little gestures of kindness were just incredible. Like, if you've had a really bad day, if it's tipping it down with rain, like, I don't think they really understand like how much that means to you. Like, it might just be a slice of cake, but it's just so heartwarming and makes you feel like, I've got this, I can totally carry on. So yeah, the healing power of cake is amazing, and generosity from strangers.
Yeah, love that. Love cake, and I love kindness of strangers. It's amazing. So, I mean, 2017, what an incredible year for you. You've walked and cycled the length of Britain solo. Absolutely phenomenal. But tell us about 2018 and what the plan is for you this year.
Yeah, so I had a little bit of a thing in my mind while I was walking last spring, but I wasn't entirely sure if I wanted to do it. And the plan, or the idea at that time, was to stand up paddleboard from Land's End to John O'Groats, to kind of top it off and take that idea of my mini triathlon on the Cam those few years ago and just stretch that out to make that a kind of length of Britain triathlon. So since that initial seed of an idea last spring, I've been working on it, and the plan is to leave in mid-April this year, to set off from Land's End on a stand-up paddleboard and travel, I think it'd be roughly about 800 miles up the west coast, and then cutting through the Caledonian Canal, and then round to the last little stretch up to John O'Groats. It's never been done before, so it would be setting a world record, which would be quite nice if I'm successful. And I mean, it's pretty scary though. Like I'm a bit scared of the sea. I don't really know what's in there, and I could get swept out and die. So it's, it's a bit daunting, that the idea of doing that, but also it's super exciting. And I won't be doing it on my own. I'm going to have a support boat and 2 crew. So that's a big challenge for me this year. I think it's going to take up to 6 months, depending on weather, but we'll see how I go.
Fantastic. And what's your background with stand-up paddleboarding? When did you start doing that?
Yeah, so I think the first time I ever did it was on the sea in Barcelona. So that was about 6 years ago. Since then, I did the section of the Cam by Stand Up Paddleboard. I have done sections of the Thames, and I'm due to do the 3 Lakes Challenge before I leave. So I'm going to do that this March as sort of like a little bit of training coming up to the big paddle. But that's kind of it, really. I haven't had huge amounts of stand-up paddleboard experience, but like the other 2 big adventures, I think they're so long that I can certainly learn to a degree as I go. Although I am definitely having some training sessions in terms of technique, which I think will be particularly important given the waves. But yeah, that's about it, really.
Tell me a little bit more about the 3 Lakes Challenge that you're doing in March. Is that like a challenge that you've created yourself, or is this something that other people can join in with and do?
Yeah, so I didn't create that. Somebody else created that, and it was initially created for kayaking, I think. But obviously, you can do it by any means, in the water or on the water. It's essentially taking the idea of the 3 Peaks Challenge, but translating it onto lakes. So it's the longest lake in Wales, England, and Scotland. And as like the 3 Peaks, you could do it in 24 hours if you wanted to. But I'm going to be doing it with 2 friends over roughly 3 days. So we're just taking a leisurely pace. But it's a nice way of seeing different parts of the country again, and a little bit of a challenge, because certainly the one in Wales is quite small. The one in England is Windermere, so I think it's 16 miles or something like that. And then Loch Orr is the one in Scotland, which is about 26 miles. So that's sort of roughly 2 days worth of paddling. So a nice little challenge in the lead up.
Oh, fantastic. And what an incredible way to see more of Great Britain. You did talk about, some of the fears that you've got, fear of the sea, fear of being, washed away. You don't know what's underneath. Are there any other fears or worries that you're sort of working through at the moment in the run up? And if so, like, how are you managing those fears?
Yeah, I guess, this adventure, this stand-up paddleboarding in length of Britain is very different to the last 2 big ones that I've done. One, it's just much more logistically challenging. Like if you're on the land and something goes wrong, like you're pretty much okay. There's nothing immediate that's particularly gonna happen. But if you're on the sea and the weather changes, it can change very dramatically and very quickly. So you're quite vulnerable out at sea. So there's a lot more planning that needs to be done. But also with the last 2, I've just kind of got up and gone, and I've not really needed much kit or any support. Whereas with the stand-up paddleboarding one, I need a support boat and 2 crews, so I need to find those members. I need to find a boat, and I also need to find sponsorship to cover the cost of this. It's quite an expensive expedition. So it has lots of other challenges as well. And of course, there can be fears around that in terms of, well, what if I don't get the funding? What if I can't find people that want to join me on this expedition? So they're definitely challenges, but I don't know if I would say that I'm scared of not making it. I think just the process to get to the start line is an incredible thing to go through. And to be able to put myself out there in such a way that, like, I want to do this thing, will you support me, is, again, it's another learning curve and another skill that I'm developing. And it's a really exciting one, actually. Like, I think it comes back to, like, I am a little bit worried maybe that maybe that won't happen, and maybe it won't come together. But it's through facing that worry and any potential fears and just going, you know what, I'm going to try my hardest. Like, I'm going to push everything to make this happen. And if I can say that I've done that and at the end of the day it doesn't work, well, you know what, I gave it my best shot. So I think that's the best strategy to have, is just to go with the idea that this is going to happen, like I'm going to make this happen, but be okay with the fact that it might not. I think that's always a possibility in whatever we do in life, but being having that positive attitude to start with and driving it through, and then just being okay with whatever the result is. It's just a nice way to approach life, I think.
Yeah. What sort of advice do you have around, I mean, do you know have you worked out how much the trip is going to cost you to do?
Yeah, I have a rough figure in mind. I mean, it varies depending on, like, I mean, the boat is a huge cost. If I can find somebody that wants to lend me a boat, maybe if my skipper happens to have their own boat and they want to bring that along, then that will definitely change how much it's going to cost. But yeah, the boat is a big cost, and then the expenses in terms of myself and my crew, like food and travel and accommodation and these things are the biggest costs.
And also like the opportunity cost of you, because you won't be working, I imagine, while you're doing the challenge. So it's taking that time out from your business. Yeah,
so there's definitely that opportunity cost there. But I mean, in terms of adventure, like I love it in terms of the personal challenge and what I get so much from it personally, but also I think going forward professionally. So I really love sharing my stories and doing talks at festivals, at schools, at corporates, lots of different places. And like, I think adventure has so many benefits for so many different areas of our lives that I think this is going to be a great way of helping other people to see that too.
Yeah.
So while it does take my time, I think there's a lot of benefit for it there afterwards.
No, 100%. Well, best of luck with it, because
thank you.
It is tough, but the key thing is actually that you've started it, that you're giving it a go. I think that's awesome. And you know, one of the other great things that you started in 2017 was the Adventure Book Club. Do you want to just share a little bit more about how that came about, why you started it, and how people can get involved with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it started as an idea between Dave Cornthwaite and myself. So Dave, for those of you that don't know, he runs the Yes Tribe and Say Yes More, which is a great group of people who are championing people to get outside and helping them get outside and go on campouts and that sort of thing. So we came up with the idea for Adventure Book Club to inspire and fuel and support people to get outside more often. So it's a subscription service. So you pay £15 a month, and that gets you a Kindle version of whatever book that we're reading that month. And we also have a London meetup. So you can come and meet adventurous, like-minded people every month, get inspiration, but also support for your ideas. So it's a lovely way of meeting people. And unfortunately, Dave left because he's super busy with his own adventures. But so I now run it on my own. And we have lots of people coming from all over the adventure world coming to join us each month. And we have lots of different books that you get to vote on each month. So again, you know, it's a really lovely way of reading about other kinds of adventure as well. So we read a book last year called One Breath, which is about freediving. And I would never have picked that book up if it wasn't for book club. But it was absolutely fascinating and a really, really good read. So it's a great way of kind of broadening your adventure horizons.
Oh, fantastic. Which other books have stood out for you?
So we read Adventure Man. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Jamie McDonald, who's going out with Anna McNuff.
Yes, absolutely. So I loved his run. You know, it's such a tough run, and I was reading it actually while I was walking. So it was kind of interesting. Look at him having to deal with sort of like being completely snowed in and stuff, and living off, I think it was butter and tuna or something. And I was just like walking in Britain, and I'm like, oh, well, you know, I haven't got any problems then. It really gives you perspective on your own adventures. So that was an awesome book.
Oh, that's super cool. And so which other books have you got coming up?
So we, which one? We just read Wild, which is about the PCT, which is great. And we've got a vote for next month's book. And then we've got our seller lineup for some books coming in March, given it's International Women's Day in March. So we've got some books by some lovely ladies. So yeah, lots and lots of different types of adventures this year we've got coming for our book votes. We've got everything from cycling and walking to rowing, some food-based adventures even. So we've got lots of things lined up.
You do coaching as well, which is amazing. And one of the hashtags which is on your website is, you know, hashtag take action, which I think is phenomenal. I'm very sort of, I think, an action type of person. But I'd just love to get your input in what advice that you have for other women and girls listening who do want to take action to move forward to achieving their goals.
Yeah, so I think the reason that I use that hashtag take action is that it's great having loads of ideas, but sometimes it can be a bit scary. Like they become really these big things, and we kind of almost put ourselves off from even starting. Whereas certainly throughout the whole of my journey, whether that's entrepreneurship or adventure, I've always started small and just thought about what's the one thing that I can do today to move me forward. Like, what's that one little action that's actually going to make me move forwards? And so, for example, in terms of like a business, sometimes it's really easy to get distracted by stuff that isn't actually moving you forward. So just having that kind of focus is super, super helpful, I find, in continually taking those actions to move forward. So thinking about who you can speak to is a great one. Like, speaking to people is a great way of moving forward. And as I say, taking that one little action every day will definitely help you build momentum over time and keep you motivated.
Yeah, no, and sometimes it's just breaking it down and just finding, that one small step that you're going to take to move you forward. So with your stand-up paddleboarding, what's the next step that you're taking with regards to that?
So I'm currently looking for my support crew. I'm after a media manager, so someone who can do sort of PR and photography, that sort of thing. And then I also need a coastal skipper. So that's my focus at the moment, to try and get these guys on board with me.
Fantastic. Now, where is the best place for people to find out information about you, and if they're, interested in social media and skippering and coming along to be part of your adventure challenge when you SUP Britain, SUP Britain, where's the best place for them to go?
Just head over to my website. It's probably the best place. So it's just FionaLQuinn.com, and exactly the same on all social media handles are just at FionaLQuinn.
Oh, fantastic. Fiona, what an incredible year 2018 is going to be. Best of luck with your world record attempt. I'll be keeping my fingers crossed for you. And just finally, is there any final words of wisdom, words of advice, or, any saying or phrase or mantra that you live by that you'd like to share?
I think don't be afraid of failure. Like with the kind of take action mantra, like just keep trying things. Because it's only through doing that you'll learn what works for you, and where the dots join up through action. So just keep trying, and don't be afraid of failure.
Absolutely, and hashtag take action. Love it.
Yeah.
Fiona, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more of your story.
Thank you very much.
Tribe, thank you so much for listening to that episode. A massive welcome to all of our new listeners in 2018. I am so excited to have you here. I'm just going to give you a couple of updates and recommendations for previous podcast episodes that you can listen to, which I think will add some value. And almost considering on from the theme of Fiona's, which is staying in Great Britain to have mini adventures at home. So I'm just going to share some different adventures that some of the incredible women of the Tough Girl podcast have done. So please do go take a listen to Ari Beresford-Webb, who's now known as Kane. Ari was the first person to run around the coast of Wales. Absolutely fantastic achievement. She shares so much great advice about the reasons why she did it, what she gained from it, and why you should also get your trainers on and get out there and get running. We've also spoken with Zoe Langley-Wathen, who's done a lot of walking throughout Great Britain. She's done the Southwest Coastal Path. She's done the Wales Coastal Path. She's done Offers Dyke. Again, lots of practical tips, lots of information. And Zoe happened to be an incredible storyteller as well. So it's a real joy to listen to her speak. I actually met both Ari and Zoe at the Women in Adventure Expo back in 2015. And it's just great to get them both on the podcast. I'd also recommend taking a listen to Elise Downing. Elise was the youngest woman the youngest woman to have run 5,000 miles around the coast of Great Britain. Absolutely fantastic. Another running podcast. The London Marathon is coming up, an incredible event. I've run it myself 5 times. Absolutely love it. The atmosphere is like none other. So if you are training for the London Marathon or you're thinking about entering a marathon, take a listen to Tanith Facey on the Tough Girl podcast. She went from going from the couch to running the the London Marathon, which is absolutely amazing. If you're still not sure what it is that you want to do, we spoke with Sam Taylor, who ended up trying over 100 different sports in a year to find out what her interests were, what her passions were, and what she wanted to continue doing. Well worth listening to that as well. Equally, you might like your sleeping. Phoebe Smith, who we've had on the Tough Girl podcast, talks about her passion for sleeping outdoors, for wild camping, and she has slept in some of the most extreme places in the world. She's got some great stories to share, and also, again, lots of tips, lots of practical advice to help you to go on your first wild camp. And I'd also recommend, there's so many great episodes to recommend. Take a listen to Mikey Stones as well, who recently just completed Powered by Me. So she spent a whole year only using her human body and a bike to travel, basically. So there was no cars, no trains, no planes. It was basically her on her bike. So that involved all commuting, all traveling, anything. She was the one who was doing it. So there's so much inspiration out there. If you are new to the podcast, then let me tell you that the podcast was started on the 4th of August in 2015. So in August 2018, we'll be coming up to our third year anniversary, which is pretty epic. Massive thank you to everybody who's been listening since we started this. And thank you to all our new listeners. Now, we are in February. Let me tell you a little bit about what is going to be happening in February. I've got the awesome Faye Shepherd coming on the Tough Girl podcast on the 13th of Feb. And Faye Shepherd travelled with Anna McNuff throughout the Andes on this incredible cycle journey. We get to learn more about Faye, how she met Anna, the challenges that she faced. She's also cycled the full length of New Zealand as well. So she shares more about that. We also talk as well around mental health, which is a hugely important topic that we want to talk more about. 14th is obviously Valentine's Day. If you are single, awesome. If you're attached, awesome. But there is going to be a prize draw happening on the 14th of Feb. I have got an incredible piece of jewellery, I suppose I would call it, from Boing, B-O-I-N-G. Their website is Boing, B-O-I-N-G-Inc.com. And it's pink, obviously, because it's a Tough Girl podcast. But I've got a piece of Boing jewellery, which will be in a prize draw for the patrons of the Tough Girl podcast. So if you are a financial contributor, a financial supporter of the Tough Girl podcast, and you are a patron via Patreon, www.patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast, your name will be automatically entered into the draw. Very exciting. We've had a number of draws since the beginning of January. We had Lois on the Loose, her book written by Lois Price. Her book went out to one of the winners in January. In March, there's going to be a very awesome map coming out. I thought that was quite cool, like March maps. And in February, it's this awesome piece of jewelry. So if you're a patron, your name automatically gets entered into the draw every single month, and you can stand the opportunity of winning one of these fabulous prizes. So please do sign up to become a patron. This is how I fund my lifestyle, basically, through the kindness of patrons who support the Tough Girl podcast every single month. Please do go check it out. Now, I've also got another exciting announcement. So on the 15th of February, it's a bit of a love over 3 days. We've got 13th, we've got Faye happening. 14th, Valentine's Day, we've got our prize draw. On the 15th of February, we've got the awesome Anna McNuff coming back on the Tough Girl podcast, Tough Girl Extra, to share more about what she's been up to since we last spoke to Anna. She's written her book, The Panther Perspective. She did an incredible cycle throughout Europe based on social media, which was very, very fascinating to hear more about. And she's obviously spent 6 months over in South America cycling the Andes with Faye as well. So lots of great information, lots of great advice. We also talk about the adventure queens and just women supporting women. It's an incredibly inspiring episode, which was awesome to record, and I can't wait to share that with you. So there is so much happening. If you want to keep updated with what is happening, then please do go check out toughgirlchallenges.com. You can sign up for the email newsletter. I'm notoriously bad at emailing out newsletters. I do it very, very infrequently. But when I do, I just share more about what is happening. Equally, you can also go and like the Facebook page, Tough Girl Challenges, where you get updates of new podcasts which are coming out. We also share inspiring articles about other women out there who are doing incredible challenges, but who maybe don't get the necessary media support from mainstream media. So it's all about promoting and supporting other women and increasing the amount of female role models in the media. So there is a ton of stuff happening. Thank you to everybody who's listening. Thank you to all my patrons. I really do appreciate it. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, have an awesome day. Just give it your all. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do subscribe. go and leave me a review. I always love reading the reviews, and send a tweet. Yeah, send a tweet to Fiona, send a tweet to me. I love hearing about it and I love getting the tweets. It does make a huge difference to get that feedback that people have found it inspiring or they've taken some advice or some tips. It's great to hear that. But enough talking from me. Have a wonderful day, and I'll be back with you next Tuesday for another episode of the Tough Girl Podcast. New episodes come out every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time. Have an awesome day. All right, take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.